I'm joined today by Mayor Brown, Jonathan Holt, the local business owner and vice chair of the committee that advises the JDA, Keith Lund, the executive director of the Grand Forks Region Economic Development Corporation, Corey Mellon of PS Industries and an EDC advisory board member, and Barry Wilford, president and CEO of the East Grand Forks Chamber of Commerce. I know that we are a resilient community. I also understand that our toughest days are still ahead of us. Those of us living through this time will remember it the rest of our lives. Here in Grand Forks, we're going to remember that we came together and supported one another. Grand Forks and the state of North Dakota have moved quickly in relation to COVID-19, and that's going to help us in the long term. But this is not our only crisis. Grand Forks is facing a likely flood. We're already dealing with an economic crisis. And over the last several years, our community, independent of COVID-19, has lost hundreds of jobs in the retail sector. But during that same period, through the work of the EDC and others, we have gained an equivalent number of manufacturing jobs. Of course, that sector of our economy is facing its own unique challenges in light of the current crisis. That's the focus of today's listening session. Fortunately, we have strong collaborative systems in place to bolster our resiliency. Grand Forks has the ability to handle adversity and to recover quickly from difficult times. For now, once we survive the current crises of COVID, the flood, and the economic challenges that you are at the forefront of, we will engage a social and economic recovery plan. These listening sessions are the first step in surviving the crises and developing that long-term plan for our successful future. These listening sessions are meant to gather information from you, the business community, and today, especially the leaders in our manufacturing sector. We want to know exactly what those challenges are that you're facing and to hear your ideas for solutions and for support. We'll share those ideas with our state and federal partners as they have requested. Together, we will guide them as they develop and package resources to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. At the same time, we can't just wait for the state or the feds to come to our rescue. With your help today, we are already beginning to shape our local approach to economic recovery. We'll start by providing a brief overview from the panel members of the very limited information we currently have. Then most importantly, we want to hear from you about specific issues, concerns, or questions you have related to the crisis. This can't be about providing answers to all of your questions. Instead, this will just be the first of several meetings. As we learn more about your challenges, we'll dig deeper into whatever issues you bring up today and move the ball forward. Here's how this will work. First, as you may have noticed, all participants aside from our panelists are muted. This is to address the logistics of bringing so many people together and to ensure that nobody's talking over one another. We'll be utilizing the chat function as our main means of hearing from you. If you hover your cursor toward the bottom of the screen, you'll see the chat option pop up. Please click on that, open the chat function. You'll see a bar open on the right side of your screen, and feel free to enter any questions, comments, concerns, issues that you have there. We'll then try to cover as many of those as possible in the limited time we have. Additionally, this chat window allows us to retain a transcript of all the questions asked. That way, we won't miss anything, and we'll have an opportunity to follow up and record your questions and concerns. Now, the panelists will try to offer a quick summary of the most pertinent background information we currently understand in terms of existing supports and plans for future programs. If he's available, I'd like to start with Mayor Brown. I know that he has a daily press conference at this time. Is the mayor with us?
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Thank you for including me. I think these sessions are important, and I think your plan of listening and responding as policymakers, I think is so important as we get through this. And again, we're in it for the long haul, and I think it's important to have these discussions early so people see that we have a plan. We have a plan.
Very good. Mayor, thank you for your
started. So I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your leadership during these times and for your support of these sessions. Jonathan Holt, local business owner. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. A couple things I just want to add. you know, I know that we're doing these listening sessions broken out sort of by industry. We know as a panel that you have all maybe faced some impossible leadership decisions over the past few days, and sometimes those decisions are sensitive, and this might not be the forum that you may want to share that openly with. Please recognize that one of the reasons we're doing this is that, as you've seen even yesterday with the restaurant licensing issue and the executive order from the mayor, that oftentimes local governments are the most nimble of local, state, and feds. So we want to try to be responsive to maybe your individual unique challenges within your business as well. So if you're not comfortable talking about this on this chat, certainly feel free to reach out to any one of us privately, and we will do all that we can to get that addressed. I've typed in my contact info in the chat box. It should just have popped up there. So just know that as we keep doing these, we're in constant communication with each other. And we're here for you night and day to hear from you and see how we can help. Thanks for the opportunity to participate.
Very good. Thank you, Jonathan. And Keith Lund and Corey Melland from the EDC and PS Industries. Mr. Lund?
Sure, thanks, Brett, appreciate it. A couple of quick comments on some resources available. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining this call today. Just like a number of organizations, we have a portion of our website that's dedicated to, the region's COVID-19 response, and that's at www.grandforks.org. And so if you haven't found one that you're using, feel free to use ours. We've been in communication with the North Dakota Commerce Department daily, more than once per day, and taking their lead on a number of things, including sort of the tier of financing that if you're experiencing some challenges that you should seek. Their advice, which I think makes a lot of sense, is number one, have a conversation with your local lender. In many cases, your local lender knows you the best, has some collateral, has a direct vested interest in your ongoing success, and in a position to respond more quickly. So that's number one. Number two, you've heard for a little while now, maybe a week or so, about the Sba program that provides loans for up to $2 million per company of 500 employees or less. There's information on the webpage about that. One of the nice features of it, it can be up to 30 years. 3.75% interest for 30 years fixed, and some other components there. So just encourage you to look into that. We've also provided some technical assistance information. The Small Business Development Center, Nicole Evans is her name. Her email and phone number is there, and she can help you complete an application that is ready to be reviewed at the SBA and really be in a better position. This particular program is on a first-come, first-served basis. So if you think this makes sense for you, we're encouraging you to do that sooner than later. The third the third tier is really for the people on the call, the manufacturers. The North Dakota Development Fund has some low-cost, less than market interest rate financing options available to you. So you can get, after I'm done with my comments, I'll put my contact information in and we can get you in contact with those folks. But they can provide gap financing, working capital loans through North Dakota primary sector manufacturers. We've been following the progression of the CARE Act, which was approved just in the wee hours of the morning this morning. I was on a call earlier today. I took some notes. I don't trust them well enough to talk about any specifics right now. I know there's a lot of people working very hard to come up with a summary of that. I'll just encourage everyone on this call to keep monitoring that. There are definitely going to be additional resources to small businesses across the United States, and including in North Dakota, there's a provision of that will provide direct payments to taxpayers to fill the gap and pay bills. There's going to be components that support local and state governments to respond to the COVID crisis as well. And so just stay tuned on that. And we'll obviously, when we get information, we'll forward that out through our communications channels. Two more comments, and then I'll end here. My comments, first of all, the Greater North Dakota Chamber has been hosting, it'll be 2 weeks in a row tomorrow, a call where state agencies brief North Dakota businesses on how they're responding and some of the resources available. We've sent that out a number of times. I know the North Dakota Chamber has, our local chamber has. Thank you, Barry. Tomorrow's call is going to be focused on disaster financing resources and unemployment. And those have been the two key topics through the course of our calls this week. So I encourage folks to register for that. If you haven't already, that's ndchamber.com, ndchamber.com to register. And the last thing I want to mention, it's so important that we gather this information, obviously thinking about what a local response would look like in terms of resources, but also providing information to the state of North Dakota. North Dakota Department of Commerce is going to be coming out with a survey this week. They'll disseminate that through their partners. I'm sure EDCs across the state, the North Dakota chambers, I assume our local chamber as well. They're going to be gathering information again by industry, trying to understand what your specific challenges are and what your ideas are, similar to what we're doing today about what would be best in terms of a state response. I encourage you to respond to that. The governor and his administration are very focused on data-driven decisions, and to the degree that we can give them our suggestions on what we'd like to see, I think that'll help craft state policy. I know there's a lot of conversation to come. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and make a couple opening comments. I'll turn it back to you, Brett.
Very good. Thank you, Keith. As Keith has mentioned, this is not the first of the sessions. On Monday, we had a session looking at the challenges faced by the food industry, grocery stores and restaurants. Yesterday, we focused on retail. And with each of those days, we've tried to bring in guests with direct relevance to that. Today, we're fortunate to have Corey Mellon from PS Industries joining us. Mr. Mellon, anything you'd like to add?
I guess I appreciate the opportunity to be involved today. I think like many of you, we've spent the last few weeks collecting data, collecting information, and trying to formulate plans and create decisions that affect a lot of people. I think one of the things that's been most challenging for us is dealing with the mental health aspect of it. From employee standpoint, there's concern both for the disease as well as what is my business going to do? How is it going to affect my paycheck? How am I going to be affected and my home life as well? Kids are at home. Are we working from home? All of those kind of things. So those have been some of the challenges that we've worked through. And I'm sure a lot of you have done that as well. Other challenges that we've had are supply chain challenges, reduced sales leads, all of those things. So Keith asked me to be part of the group here today, and maybe I'll put my contact information in the chat as well. But I think we all got to work together, and if somebody's got a good idea, let's jump on it and share that across there.
Very good. Thank you, Corey. And final member of our daily panel, Barry Wilford from the local chamber. We have Barry's mic is muted. Can you take care of that there? There you go.
Good. Thanks, Brett, for including me here. As a chamber, we're very concerned about both the physical and economic health of our communities. Keeping as much commerce moving for as long as we can is very important. To assist with economic health of our community, the chamber partnered last week with the Herald to establish a list of Grand Forks business hours and special circumstances. The Herald has published this several times, and it's also on their website. It's updated on a regular basis, so keep sending updates to businesshours@dfherald.com. We also sent out links to apply for unemployment in last Friday's member-to-member. Keeping people with an income stream to the extent possible is also very important. Yesterday, the chamber also sent out an email with kind of the 10 official key links to get updates on the COVID virus and the implications for business in particular. Finally, I just want to encourage everybody to keep supporting our local businesses. We all need to work together, and we'll get through this. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. Very quickly, we want to get to your questions and comments. Again, if you haven't already done so, you'll want to open up the chat function on the right side of your screen. You'll do that by hovering your cursor across the bottom of the screen. That will open up a toolbar, including a function for the chat. Click on chat and you'll see the chat box open up. That's already providing a number of websites and resources, the telephone numbers and contact information that we've been talking about. In addition to today's panel, we're also fortunate to be joined by Courtney Jensen from the State Department of Commerce and Grand Forks City Council President Dana Sandy. I'd like to give them both a moment. Ms. Jensen, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words.
No, thank you. Well, first of all, I've been on all of the calls that have happened this week, and I have to say the City of Grand Forks is doing a fantastic job of disseminating information, connecting businesses and honestly bringing us feedback from the businesses. And so I just want all of you who are listening to know your city and your community has you. And right now we don't have always all the answers that we want, but they're working very, very hard. I'm getting multiple communications a day from Grand Forks. And so thank you for that. That makes my job easier. One of the things that we're working really hard on right now, in the chat box, I shared the North Dakota state link. And what that is it's all COVID resources that are being updated in real time. So as new information becomes available, we're updating that. If you go to the page itself, it may seem static. The same boxes exist along the bottom. If you click on those boxes and open it up, at the top of the page, it tells you when it was last updated. Because as some of you may have realized, things are changing very, very quickly. And we have teams of people who are specifically tasked to research and update that. So every one of us in commerce has a U.S. contact and a U.S. department that we're working with to get as real-time updates as we can on those. And so if you click on those, they do say what day they were updated on. You know, for example, if you're under the finance link and you click on the information about SBA, you will have the most up-to-date information as we have it and as it's actually put into place. As Keith mentioned, we have updates that we're expecting to come. They have gotten through the Senate, but they're not yet through the House. And so we have to wait until those become live until we're going to update them to that place. So once they're there, they should be in place. Please give us some space and grace if we don't yet know how some of that information applies. Sometimes it passes, but we don't know how the trickle down works. So we're all working together to do those resources. And then like under labor, you can get information about employees and employers. The other day, the 1 week waiting period for unemployment insurance was waived by the governor. That was an update that we put on there. So do check back for that. I know other sources of information are utilizing our source. So you should be getting the most up-to-date information from there as well. But in case you're looking for something specific. Also, I'm the contact for the state for the region. For this region. And so if any of you need extra support, any of your people through your EDC, through your chamber, whatever, can put you in touch with me if you need me. The governor is doing a daily press conference every day at 4 p.m. And he's giving good information and good updates in that. We haven't gotten our most recent update yet from the Bank of North Dakota, but we're expecting some new information about that. Some of the messaging that I'm really interested in talking with everyone about right now is we're all talking about shop local. And that's very important to stimulate our local economies. But we also have to talk about what's happening when we're ordering on Amazon. It's not just about shopping local and keeping those dollars here locally. It's actually also about not interrupting our supply chains, not putting too much stress on our postal services. Right now, it's a critical time to get supplies, and we have kind of that reduced bandwidth and reduced capacity. So sending that out to people as part of your messaging, shop local, save lives, get supplies to where they need to go. It's great messaging. And I know that some of our partners have done stories about that. Also, I think Keith mentioned already, but there's a state survey coming out. We're going to be asking you guys for information about your businesses. Once that gets sent out by all the leaders on this call, it would be really appreciated. That's how we get the feedback, so we know what to bring to our state leaders and what we know what to push forward to our federal leaders as well. Because our governor does have some say, or not some say, but some clout definitely. He is a numbers-based guy, and he really wants to make sure he can back up what he's bringing forward for requests. Am I missing anything?
No, it was great, Courtney, and thank you for your interest and your support. You've been joining us each day, so thanks for being willing to jump in here without. I didn't give you much of a notice that I was going to ask you to do that. So, Courtney
Talk
Jensen,
fast, it's fine.
wonderful. Courtney Jensen from the State Department of Commerce. Thank you, Courtney. If he's willing, I think that City Council President Dana Sandy was also with us.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. I wish you had let me go before Courtney, because she's certainly a tough act to follow. I think really the one and only message that I can provide is a word of thanks to everyone for participating in these calls. I think the city of Grand Forks is interested in hearing what's going on in the manufacturing community. I personally, and I know Brett has as well, we've been talking to financiers in town, the banks, talking to them about ways that they can not only make monies available for local businesses, as well as hopefully provide some grace periods for people on payments. For example, Choice, I spoke with Choice this morning. Choice Bank is offering 6 months, no principal or interest payments for 6 months for businesses that have loans with them. So we're reaching out, trying to help. We're here to listen today, and hopefully we can identify more things that we can do as our community to help support all of our local businesses and of course our citizens. So thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you for your leadership. From day one, Dana has been the point person for council, and he's been taking the key questions and issues from each of these sessions and has been working on them immediately. There have already been changes, so thank you, Dana, for that leadership. We do have some questions, issues are starting to pop up in the chat box. From Eric Murphy, this is a local business that came to the city with some city support from the JDA, asking about inventory issues. Maybe Corey or someone else willing to discuss. Corey, I think it'd be best if we could hear from you about inventory issues for manufacturing.
Well, if I read his question correct, the cancellation of a lot of events definitely can impact and does impact. Well, we had a similar situation. We had a number of trade shows that were canceled, and our staff was not able to attend those events. And it does leave you with items that you would have liked to have moved out of your inventory. I would say be diligent in marketing. This is going to end eventually. Look at possibly pre-sales. You may have to inventory those for your customer, but eventually they're going to need those items. And so if you can look at long-term, 3 months, 6 months out, are you able to negotiate with them to take those on consignment or take those, make orders for them now, but delay shipment or delivery of them? That might help at least shore up what you have orders for.
Very good. And the city can't solve all the problems. The city can't solve many problems, but a lot of solutions come from partners working together. Even partners who had, before the crisis, been competitors can come together during these times. One of the things that was mentioned during yesterday's session was that while some industries are overloaded with inventory, others have available warehouse space, and we might be able to use these sessions as a way to bring those underutilized capacities and those needs together. Any other further comments on the issue about inventory at this time? We do have a question about, many of us just received notice right before the start of this session that Minnesota has now issued, the Governor Walz in Minnesota has issued a stay-at-home order. This is obviously going to affect not just daily life, but the operation of manufacturing in our community. That is breaking news, so I don't know that we have any immediate comments, but it's probably also something that many of us have been thinking about. Keith or Barry, do you have any comments about that?
Brett, actually, I've got a couple things. First of all, we're going to be sending out the governor's emergency executive order to all of our entire membership list here in just about 5 minutes. I think on page 13, I think is the part where most people are going to be most interested. That's where the guidelines on essential critical infrastructure workforce is defined. So basically it defines which industries are critical and which ones are not. And it's about 10 pages, 15 pages long. It's fairly lengthy, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of additional follow-up to help businesses interpret, am I critical infrastructure workforce or am I not? And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion on that over the next 24 hours. I'm sure those clarifications will end up taking a lot of bandwidth for Keith and I over the next few hours.
We're
I'll just,
go ahead, Keith. Yes,
if
please.
I can just add to that, I've spoken to, I think, two businesses, won't name them, that they as their core business may not be listed as essential infrastructure businesses, but they feel, and I would agree, that they are part of the essential part of their supply chain. So if their essential businesses stay open, they need to receive, goods to help those essential businesses operate. So I agree with Barry, and that just emphasize to really familiarize yourself with that. And really, we can, I've sent information to the Department of Commerce and to the City of Grand Forks, just letting them know that these two companies, in terms of how they feel that they are integral supply chain partners. So advocate for yourself is my advice, and understand how you fit within the tier of that essential business designation. It's really important.
It's a pretty dramatic example of the dynamic situation we're dealing with, where things are changing by the hour. We are two cities, but we're one community, and this stay-at-home order is already affecting us very directly. Courtney, you've provided a lot of information in the chat box there. Let's give you a moment as well, please.
Okay, so what I did is I just copied and pasted the response that I had got from the North Dakota Department of Emergency Services, which is part of Homeland Security. And as of right now, the governor is not specifically putting out a listing of what are essential services. A lot of the conversation has been happening on a case-by-case basis. And the outreach, if we go in that direction, will be determined like Minnesota has done, where it's more laid out at that point. A lot of the information that we're using right now is coming directly from the Department of Defense as far as how we're defining those things, and from FEMA as well, as far as like critical infrastructure, things like that. One of the things that I was actually just typing before you went to me is we're telling businesses to put together basically your letter of defense to the governor as to why you think that you are critical and part of that critical supply chain. And we're saying do this now for the state of North Dakota. I would say do it in Minnesota as well to make your case if you don't see where you fit in naturally into the conversation. Also, another thing that we've been talking to a fair number of businesses about is can you pivot? Right now, if you don't fit in to that critical supply chain at this point, or it's harder to make that, can your manufacturing pivot? And so that's been happening already within the state on a pretty impressive basis, actually. And I had a conversation with David Kleppe from procurement, and he said to me he would be happy to have a conversation with any of you at any point in time about how you can pivot to something that's critically needed in the U.S. on a larger scale, to get some of those federal contracts as well during this time, because they put priority on small business. And so if anybody wants contact information, I'm guessing that Keith has that contact information. My guess is he could share that. If not, I can find David Kleppe's information and send that out. But this is a time to just really, at this moment on the North Dakota side, to be proactive, because they are taking those letters and they are tracking them. So that's kind of what I have right now.
It seems like just a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't using the word pivot very often. It may have been years since I'd used it. And now we seem to be using this term on a very regular basis. But what I'm hearing from you there, Courtney, is businesses need to think about not just the way they've been doing business, but the ways that they might be able to do business in this changing environment. And that the state is doing everything it can to make connections with the feds or whoever is necessary to include businesses that can provide critical infrastructure like that. Yes. Fantastic.
Yeah, and we are tracking what we get for contacts. So if that says, hey, we're concerned about this, we're tracking those and I'm sending them up the line. I can't tell you right now what that looks like, just to be honest. We're all kind of in this together, and it's a moment of, yes, space and distancing, but also a lot of grace as we learn our new normal and we get to watch the people around us rise to the occasion. And you know, today this is a little off topic, but I have to share it. They put into place a hashtag that's in this together ND. And my daughter heard that and started making pictures, and she's now posted them in the window. And that's kind of the response that we're getting. And so deep breaths. We're all here to help. I'm here to help. Let me know what I can do.
Very good. I was going to ask the panel members and anyone else about workforce issues, but a caller or a participant, Carrie Ring, is asking about traveling to and from work. Even if a business is considered critical, how do employees continue to get to work? And the city's bus system has seen a drop in ridership, and so there's been some cutback. Council President Sandy, do you have anything for us in terms of what we might know about people getting to and from work?
Thanks, Brett. I haven't heard. Of course, there was a little bit of bad publicity in the news in the last day or so with the city's area transit. I actually coincidentally had a call into Todd Phelan asking where we are on city's area transit and dial a ride, and he was going to check, and I haven't heard back. So I haven't heard of any problems, but not everyone has my phone number, so I'm not sure.
Good. And again, the purpose of these sessions is not to provide a lot of immediate answers, especially in such a rapidly changing environment. It's a chance for us to get concerns like that so that we can go to work on trying to address them. So thanks for that question. Nationally, I've seen stories of distilleries pivoting to a role in manufacturing around hand sanitizer. I've heard about these as well. I don't know specifics if our local breweries or if that's a potential capacity that could be pivoted in our community where we do have a shortage of those.
But there are 2 that are in communication with the state and with All True for hand sanitizer.
Fantastic. So that is ongoing
Yep.
immediately.
Maybe more, but 2 I know of.
We have provided a packet for employees with a letter on company letterhead, a copy of our letter from the Defense Department to provide in case they get stopped. So there's a good idea. If yours is a business that is going to be open and your workers need that, then perhaps businesses could put something together of that sort. I don't know what the official response would be to that, but that seems like a worthwhile idea.
Brett, that's a really good point, and I think what the commenter is saying is, not only should you advocate to your local community and to the state government, but also educate, your customer, and potentially in this case the prime contractor to the National Defense, of how integral you are to their supply chain, so that they can list you as a central part of their supply chain. So you need to be advocating for yourself in many different avenues.
And please note, Ms. Jensen has posted there is a need for bottling equipment in North Dakota right now, or in the state, specifically in Grand Forks. If that is part of your operation, or if your operation can pivot to address that, we want to make sure we're doing that as well. Red River Bio had over 100,000 gallons of hand sanitizer. They need the way to bottle it. Okay, so. Yes.
Yeah. Brett, if I can, there's something I wanted to bring up at some point. It seems like now is a good enough time. We have been having conversations with a number of manufacturers, and not everyone. So those of you on the call we haven't spoken with, we plan to in the very near future. We've learned that this pandemic has created a surge of business. I would say that most of those are in food processing. And so one of the things that we would like to learn sooner than later is how many companies, manufacturers in particular, are seeing a surge and are looking for employees to meet that demand. One of the things that we've talked about is potentially trying to connect on a short-term basis as employees are laid off, and unemployment benefits are fantastic. It's only up to 60% maximum. Are there employment opportunities on a short-term basis that might help folks that are affected with layoffs in other industries? So I think this chat function is just as good a place as any, or I provided my contact information earlier in that chat function. But we really like to know which companies are seeking to hire at this time, so we could maybe make some connections. And we're talking about having an event. More detail on that later. It's not firm up enough to share with you right now, but we want to try to make those connections.
Very good. And Eric Murphy is asking, how does a bottler pivot from a food bottling operation to more of a chemical operation. Again, it's not the purpose of these listening sessions to provide answers to all of those questions, but instead to gather those questions so that city and state government can be looking for solutions. As it was mentioned at the beginning, local government can be particularly nimble. So we'll be taking these questions, concerns to the mayor's office, to Todd Phelan, the city administrator, and in conjunction with the health department to look for solutions to those kinds of challenges. Also, we're seeing American Crystal Sugar has been doing the process of providing letters to employees who need to travel. Very good. If you haven't already done so, if you joined us late, one of the most important parts of these listening sessions is the chat function on the right. You can access that by hovering your cursor across the bottom of the screen. You'll see a toolbar pop up. Click on a chat, and that will open this really valuable resource on the side, the chat function. Becca Kruger at EDC wondering if there's a rapid way to create some sort of official pass. I know that we had a local business in here yesterday offering some services that might be useful for that. Philadelphia Macaroni Company is definitely looking for additional staffing. If you're in the position where you need to furlough or lay off employees and you think they might be a fit for food manufacturing, there's work for them. Very good. Several questions have been posted regarding essential employees being stopped on law enforcement. So the city will be looking at ways to facilitate the movement of workers for essential industries. It is a rapidly changing situation here, but one of the most important things we can get is questions, comments, concerns from business owners. I'm curious if companies pivoting to, for instance, hand sanitizer, if there are issues with liability. I love that they do it. I just want to make sure they have thought out insurance issues. Insurance is a sector that we have, that I have not yet thought of. Council President Sandy, maybe that would be another potential listening session, is the insurance sector, whether we do it in this public format, or I know Council President Sandy has been working with folks behind the scenes. So there's an idea for us as well. There's that offer from FedEx again that was offered yesterday. We received a letter from Lowe's and other customers who have been classified as essential that are telling us that we are essential to them. Does that meet the criteria for staying open? Again, Courtney, can you provide a recap again on what the process is for being considered as essential?
Well, again, I will say right now in North Dakota anyway, there is not an official process that's in place, and I wish I had more information than that. But we actually aren't in a shelter in place situation. I think Minnesota is a little bit further down that line than we are. I'm hesitant to speak too much about that. I will say that right now, when the governor's discussed this, as far as funding and things like that goes, he's been utilizing the Department of Defense, supply chain, and he's been utilizing the FEMA disaster guidelines. At this point, one of the recommendations that I have is, again, to send a letter to the governor's office explaining why your business is critical in and of itself or as a part of a critical supply chain, and get that in before everybody else starts doing it if that shelter in place order, if that lockdown order comes at this point.
Good. Thanks again for being here today, Courtney. Let's clarify quickly. The stay-at-home order is affecting Minnesota, a major part of our community in East Grand Forks. This is not the law in North Dakota at this time, and we don't have that is not the case. So this idea of essential businesses is not yet part of the dialogue, the immediate dialogue in the state of North Dakota. Blue Weber has asked, how will residents who live in East Grand Forks and work in Grand Forks interact with the stay-at-home order? Again, not possible for us to offer answers to all those questions, but a really good question for us to be looking into. The city will be collecting all of this. The session is being recorded. The chat box and a transcription will be made available. We'll be capturing these ideas both for the city and to be pushing up to the state and to our federal partners in the congressional delegation. So these are exactly the kinds of questions and ideas, concerns that we need from these sessions. So thanks for those of you who are able to put those in the chat box there. These sessions, this first week here, we started on Monday with food related. Yesterday was retail. Today is manufacturing. Tomorrow we'll be considering professional services. It's the intention to continue some form of these listening sessions as the situation continues to develop so rapidly. I don't know that we will be holding the exact same series next week, or that there'd be a need for that. But the intention at this point is to continue to have listening sessions for the foreseeable future. We'll be pushing invites out for these sessions, both from the city and through the chamber and EDC membership, which is, I'm guessing, where many of you received the information about today's session. And Dana is pointing out the shelter in place is not precluding people leaving their homes. It's just restrictions on unnecessary travel, which is an important thing as well. Brandon Baumbach from the EDC with a note concerning supply chain disruption, asking, Corey, are you seeing any light at the end of the tunnel with the rest of the world overcoming the worst of COVID-19?
I think it's a little early to speculate. I guess if you want to speculate, you can see that it's moving from the coasts maybe to the center of the country. Some of our suppliers that are possibly on the coast, they might reach the apex of the curve earlier and be able to return. It's really going to depend on how things go. Right now, we've seen 2 of our suppliers that have decided that they're no longer going to be open. They are to the East Coast, and we've communicated with the other of our critical vendors. Them, like us, are critical vendors to other essential industries, and their plan right now is to stay business as usual or business as unusual as it is now. I think that for us right now, we're sitting in a good position. The ability for vendors to take staged steps in reducing their workload or reducing their staffing allows them to stay open. And I think communication is key. We're letting our vendors know that we need that material coming to us so that we can supply our customers. But I do think that there's going to be somewhat of a wave, and you may see vendors that are on the coast that are going to close earlier but open earlier and wave across the country.
Very good. I want to continue the discussion about supply chain, but first, Courtney has something she'd like to share.
So I was just sent a message from the Bank of North Dakota, and they are asking for manufacturing industry who could and would be willing to retool for products needed to manage the emergency, specifically personal protective equipment, cleaners, ventilators, respirators, or companies that possess raw materials for these products that they would like to sell or be willing to sell. Please ask them to connect with James Lamont, Director of Economic Development and Finance. That is my boss. So again, we are looking for manufacturers, personal protective equipment, cleaners, ventilators, respirators. This request is coming for the state, but also for procurement needs from outside of the state as well. Supply chains have been disrupted enough that we are seeing critical need at this point, and we have been asked at the federal level to put this out.
All right.
I will send that in the chat box. And that's James Lamont from my office. That's my boss.
Thank you, Courtney. Barry, you had a comment about a supply chain as well. And I'm also wondering, here in the North Country, a lot of our economy is connected with Canada. Of course, commerce is continuing through the border, but anything that you'd like to say about supply chain appeal?
Well, I know that it does work. It's worked in California for 2 of our Grand Forks companies who had to appeal when California went to a shelter in place about a week ago. So what Courtney suggested, I think it'll be important that we send that letter and start making preparations if we feel that we're part of that critical infrastructure supply chain as companies.
Very good. There's a question about test results and the possibility of pivoting not just for those showing symptoms, but for employees of essential industries. We do not, I'm not aware of any answer to that question, but we will move forward with that question and see what kind of information we can get out to people. President Sandy has noted that Dana, hey Dana, the North Dakota governor is hosting his press conference, his daily press conference at 4 o'clock. It's likely that we'll be hearing something from Governor Burgum in relation to Minnesota's order. So that's something to be considering. We welcome you to join that as well. Going back to workforce for a moment, Corey, you'd mentioned, and it had come up in the chat box, that some industries are having to lay off, others are able to hire. What other sort of workforce development has been, up until a few weeks ago, probably one of our #1 economic development issues in this area? What is happening for manufacturing in terms of workforce at this time?
We've been very successful in being able to recruit employees to work for us. I think we have some of the best employees in the world that work for PS Industries at this point. We do have some open positions right now in the company. With the limited access to our facility, we're not actively interviewing in person. There are some interviews happening via telecommunication to fill those positions. We've been successful. It's been difficult over the last few years to attract employees to this area, and it seems like a lot of the manufacturing industry in Grand Forks, we borrow from each other, or someone moves around, and we share those employees around. So,
and what does that look like over the last week or so?
We're stable. We have some employees that are at home. We use quite a few UND students on some of our evening shifts as part-time help who traveled for spring break. Good for them, not so good for us. They were in hotspot regions in the country. We asked them to not return to work until they've gone through a quarantine period. With the change in the education system with going to online, a lot of those students may be available for more hours, or a good opportunity for them to maybe use some of their working daytime hours instead of going to class, working and doing those online things at the evening, which could be a great opportunity for Philadelphia Macaroni, who's looking for additional employees. If you can work that part-time work into your schedule.
I hate to speculate, but right now we're talking about a lot of employees being laid off. It seems that it's possible over the next few weeks, there may be some sectors of our local economy that will be needing workers to ramp up very, very quickly. So Again, the situation's changing quite rapidly. Becca Kruger from the EDC mentioning a virtual forum that will be held on April 9th around human resources. And we have a question from Alex B. from Odra Street Sweepers. If they plan on emailing the governor a proactive approach, is there value in including anyone from EDC, chamber, or municipal government to support their case? Courtney, you're nodding your head. You mind commenting
Sure.
on that?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It's easy for each of us to feel like what we do is critical, and it is critical to our society, but to move to that designation of emergency services, if you can get one of your EDC city representatives to agree and write you that letter of support, that is very, very valuable. I would suggest emailing the governor's office as well as sending a paper copy if you can to his office. It guarantees someone's going to see it. I know that they're doing the best they can. Of course, they're getting inundated with information as well. But I would recommend doing both, and a letter of support is a wonderful idea.
Great, great. Thank you for that. As far as city council, you can send email or a telephone call to any of the 7 council members. We'll all be funneling that to Dana, a very busy guy these days. But we'd be looking at those, of course, on a case-by-case basis, but wanting to support local business and local manufacturing in every way possible.
Yes, I'll just add, Brett, for particular for the manufacturing basis as primary sector, which is the EDC's focus. We'd like to be knowledgeable about who's making that case. And so we can, when we speak to commerce, we can speak to our industry base specifically and advocate for them. So we'd like to know who's making that case to the state.
Good. The city, chamber, and EDC, strong partners always, especially during this particular time. So I suspect that we will come up with some sort of process by which, and I'm just suggesting this at this time, perhaps we come up with a process where the 3 partners could support those kinds of applications. Yeah. Now, of the 3 sessions so far, this one has gone by the quickest. And I want to give people time to pivot over to the governor's daily press conference. And so quickly in the remaining minutes we have here, any closing comments from panel members? Jonathan, anything from you?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I would just echo what we said at the beginning of the meeting, and that's, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're going to continue to hold these listening sessions, and your participation is really what makes them successful. So we hope that you can stay engaged, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.
Very good. Barry from the chamber.
I guess I would just add that I just listened to the governor of Minnesota, and I was very impressed by the governor of Minnesota understanding the importance of keeping business operating in these tough times, and balancing that with the public health issue. And I know North Dakota will do a similar job of making that right, those correct decisions and that right balance, because business really does need to continue, at least at some level during this tough time.
Absolutely. I think we're fortunate that we've had the right balance so far of being proactive on the health front and being acutely aware of and sensitive to the needs of business. Yep. Keith and Corey?
I'll jump in. I'm very interested. I think we received a couple of comments about who might be hiring, but if there are companies that have seen an increase in demand for their products or services as a result of COVID-19, we really would like to know. If you feel comfortable putting that information in the chat function, that's fantastic. I provided my contact information in that chat function, so you can contact me directly, either my desk line, cell phone, or email. But we want to compile a list so we can communicate that to folks who might be looking for employment in the short term.
Excellent. And actually, I'm going to go back to Barry. Barry, and I'd imagine we have Adam Kurtz has been joining these sessions each day as well. This
Yep.
sounds like something for the Chamber and the Herald to get out the news on this.
Great idea. I'll forward that to Corey.
Excellent. And Corey Melland,
Yes.
you get to have the last word today, sir.
I guess I would say, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the shelter in place in Minnesota, and I think it's going to be a challenge. I know we have 22 employees that live in Minnesota that we want to be able to bring them back to work. Some of them have the option to work from home, others don't. It's hard to have a welder take home a bunch of steel and weld it in his garage on the weekend. It just doesn't work. We did receive a letter from what I would call a primary sector essential business that we are a supplier to. And that will be something, they sent us a letter identifying us as a critical vendor to them. That is something that we would add in our packet that we would send to the Minnesota governor or to the North Dakota governor. So if you can get your customers, if they're primary sector essential, to provide you with that, I think that would assist you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time, both to the people who've joined us as participants, but also to our panel members. And tomorrow we'll be meeting again at 3 o'clock. The focus for tomorrow is professional services. Looking forward to staying in touch with you all in these very rapidly changing circumstances. Thank you now.